What's going on, everybody? Castaneda here. Today I'm going to tell you 4 reasons why I think Cubans supported Trump this election.
This is my land, this is my city, and this is my flag. These are my people, man, this is my clan. We will not give it up to you, no, you cannot have.
The first reason Trump appealed to Cuban Americans specifically. Trump strategically campaigned to appeal to the Cuban American voter, referring to things that really resonated with the Cuban American audience. You have to understand something about Cuban Americans. A lot of the ones that voted for Trump are very closely connected to their own past as Cubans. So even the younger version, even the younger generation of Cubans, they know what happened in their native country politically some 60 odd years ago when communism took over in Cuba. Right? So in general, most Cuban Americans are educated about the political situation in Cuba and what happened there and how communism infected and the dictatorship infected that island and things went downhill from there, right? So as a Cuban American person watching the political drama play out, a candidate which is specifically mentioning things about communism and about Cuban history in a way that is consistent with how you've heard it your entire life is going to automatically appeal to you. Another thing Trump did was when he would come to Miami and do these rallies for Cuban Americans, he would bring former Cuban political prisoners on the stage, dissidents, members of the dissident population in Cuba, people who are like actively fighting against communism today in Cuba, are seen, pictured, and videoed with Trump. So the Cuban Americans are saying, here's an ally. Here's somebody who understands our plight with Cuba, and they're juxtaposing that with Barack Obama's policies, which were trying to normalize relationships with Cuba, which I'm not going to make an argument to whether that was good or bad, but in the Cuban American mind, at least the ones that are very passionate about the politics of Cuba and very passionate about seeing Cuba free, they're seeing a shift in the attitude of America toward Cuba as condemning communism, condemning dictatorship, and elevating the Cuban exile community. So that automatically puts him in good standing with them. That sets the stage for what he's going to continue to do, and the little micro messages that he's sending about communism and about freedom and about liberty and about censorship in the Cuban Americans' eyes is all being funneled through a lens. Which brings me to my second point. Cuban Americans and Cubans born in Cuba and coming to this country, becoming citizens and voting, they have a lens through which they see the world. You have to understand something about Cuban politics that can make you perfectly understand why they supported Trump, especially with all of his accusations of voter fraud, accusing the country of conspiring against them, right? The reason that Cuban Americans bought a lot of that, the reason it resonated with them is because they are viewing American politics through a Cuban political lens. You have to understand that where they're from, in these small countries, very small, easy to control, centralized government countries, not like America, 50 individual countries, you're talking about a small country, fraudulent elections are very possible. So Trump didn't have to convince them that it was possible. By merely making the accusation, they say, oh, this is just like what happens in Cuba. They're making connections that don't perfectly fit because they're viewing things through a Cuban political lens. Cuba and the United States are very different. The United States is far bigger. We have a different governing structure. We have a constitution that has different bylaws, different rule sets and values, state autonomy. We have a lot of things different about our politics, right? The Cuban political system is far more simplified and easy to understand. The government owns everything. That's pretty. I just gave you, if you are studying political science, I just gave you Cuba's political structure. The government owns everything. It's pretty simple. So a Cuban's going from a simplistic understanding of the way politics works, and they're trying to view American politics through that lens. But the problem is that in America, there's loopholes and there's autonomy and there's states having certain rights and there's certain laws and there all sorts of little loopholes, it's a complex system. It's not as simple as government owns everything. But the problem is for most Cuban Americans, they haven't removed the lens of how they view politics. And so they're still trying to interpret the American political language with their Cuban vocabulary. And Trump knew this. And Trump's playing into that. And I'm not saying he did it maliciously, but he's talking about things that are sensitive for a Cuban to hear. Fraudulent elections, of course, they literally live that. In Venezuela, you had a fraudulent election that propped up Nicolas Maduro as the president that everybody recognized was a fraudulent election. So they're saying, oh, it's happening there, it could happen here. And so they're coming to the table with their lens. They're coming to the table already saying this is what goes down. Trump is just exposing it on a grander scale. They're giving him the benefit of the doubt immediately. And it's coming from a lack of understanding of American politics because they're not trying to understand American politics. They are trying to synthesize what they know about Cuban politics with this new structure in which they live. The third thing, left-wing denial of their own failure. When people talk about radical beliefs, radical followers of Trump, radical, Cubans who don't know what, listen, I think radicals are composed of people who are genuinely crazy, who are genuinely radical, who radicalize all their beliefs, who think everybody should eat a certain meal or everybody should do a certain thing. But I think there's a lot of people who generally would have no problem critiquing Trump, but when left-wing politicians do absurd things, when liberals do absurd things and they pretend it's not absurd, that can irritate somebody. Or rather, when personal character charges are levied against somebody because they think differently than you, they're going to have a tendency to become defensive. And so if you call somebody a racist for supporting Trump, they might want to support him even stronger because you're applying a false narrative to them. The left-wing attack on Trump, the assault on Trump, where a lot of it was merited. A lot of their critique of Trump was understandable. He was doing a lot of things that were unprecedented, a lot of things that weren't really wise as a leader. He's made tons of statements that no leader should make. And he's done many things they disagreed with on a fundamental level, and they had every right to. I think they were right. However, the tone of attack toward Trump created a support system of defense. And so when we're not approaching this conversation, when people on the left don't approach this conversation with at least offering human dignity to the other side, people who are on the other side or in the middle swaying to the other side are going to plant themselves firmly because they feel like you're attacking them. They're not going to agree with you when you tell them that they're racist for supporting Trump, but they might support Trump even more because you're giving them a reason to radicalize that belief. You're basically making them into a kind of a martyr. The inability to talk to one another about these differences has created such extreme stances on both sides where somebody calling somebody out for a belief they hold makes them want to call the other person out for the belief they hold, and it just becomes grandstanding where we're missing one another. We're not talking to one another. We're not connecting on something productive, but we're just assuming things about one another and characterizing the other by what we hate about the person they support. And that can't be. And I think Cuban Americans have looked at characters on the left, your AOCs, your Bernie Sanders, things they've said specifically about former dictators in the land that they're from, especially Bernie Sanders. They're going to say, if that's the left, I'm not with that. I'm over here with this side. So the tribalization of politics has created that you're a Cuban American, you hate communism, you hate that your people have been abused by a man named Fidel Castro. Bernie Sanders says Fidel Castro wasn't all that terrible, that is, that he did a lot of good things. You're going to say there's a D Democrat next to his name. I'm going to jump on the other side because clearly this side's on the right side of my history. And that's where the lens plays in. They're only looking through the Cuban lens. They don't care about other issues. Trump got the Cuban thing right in talking about it and the way he talked about it. He got that right. He resonated with people. He told people that he hated communism, that he was going to free Cuba. That's all they needed to hear because they're only looking through that lens. If they were looking at it totally, what is he doing for environmental efforts? What's he doing for the black community? What's he doing to lower taxes? What's he doing with healthcare? They might not have come to that conclusion if they were looking at it honestly through that lens. But what they did was they viewed him through the lens of he wants to help Cuba and then subsequently redeemed all those other things and found a way to explain why he's doing a good job at all these other things because they felt like they had something that they couldn't lose. The left missed the mark in resonating with the Cuban population, specifically with regard to communism. I understand communism is a red herring. Shout out to Clue. If anybody's a Clue fan, you'll know that quote. I realize that the communist boogeyman is a thing. Calling out communism, calling Joe Biden a communist is stupid. I understand that. However, if you are a politician and you're appealing to a voter base, you have to be sensitive to the things that matter to them. They care about your stance on socialism. Now, if you want to say that you want to adopt a type of socialism that's not really the type of socialism that you saw in Cuba, be clear about that. Clarify that to this group of people who, they're not evil people. They're just genuinely concerned. They don't know how politics works. They hear socialist, they hear democratic socialism, and they think, it's Cuba again. It's not, but that's what they're thinking. The left's mismanaging of talking to this community, empathizing with this community, created this problem to where now somebody comes around and he's saying the things they like to hear. And he's actually saying some accurate things. And now they're like, well, this guy's going to ride with us. Which brings me to my last and final point. The fourth reason why Cubans supported Trump is because, listen, there's a long-standing bitter history between Cubans and Democrats. The Brothers to the Rescue mission, the deportation of Elian Gonzalez, the Bay of Pigs invasion, all occurred under Democratic presidents, and Cubans genuinely believed that the Democratic presidents could have helped, but didn't. That's important. Cubans having that history, having that viewpoint of Democratic presidents and Democratic policies is going to inform how they view them as a whole. Add to that, Barack Obama takes out wet foot, dry foot, which was basically a policy that allowed a Cuban, if he was traveling to America by boat, if he touched land, he was okay to stay. Barack Obama removes that with the support of Republican politicians, of course. No one mentions that, including Marco Rubio, who I'm pretty sure supported that. But all the Cuban remembers is Democratic president did that. So all that does is add to the narrative. It adds to the pile of narrative reasons why they're not our ally. Mind you, the Kennedys, John F. Kennedy, one of the most controversial figures in Cuban history because of the Bay of Pigs. Yeah, because what basically happened was the Cubans thought John Kennedy was going to send air support for them when they landed on Cuba, and they were just going to go hand-to-hand combat on the ground, and they were going to win, and Cuba was going to be free. John Kennedy says, no, we're not going to send air support. So they think, oh, he betrayed us and he hates us. After that, John F. Kennedy actually felt bad. It was like, we're going to do everything we can to get him out of it, to get Fidel Castro out of Cuba. And the Kennedys were actually one of the last sitting presidents to really coalesce and have organized effort to try to get Castro out of Cuba. So it's funny that Cubans hate the Kennedys. When John F. Kennedy, Operation Mongoose occurred under his watch, and that was one of the most fortified, strongest pushes to get Castro out. But all they remember is that failure of the Bay of Pigs and him being the president at the time that the president said, we're not going to send air support, and all these people got put in jail, and some of them died. So you have that history, and it's bitter. The point I'm making is that it's not as simple as saying Cubans are just racist, Cubans are idiots, they're all ignorant. One of my biggest pet peeves about this year's election was the way we talked to each other, the way people discussed politics on social media. It made me upset because at the end of the day, we're all human beings with interests. We all have vested interests in what we vote for. We all have fears. We all have hopes and dreams. Depending on where you're born, your priorities in political issues might be changed. Depending on the color of your skin, the person you vote for might be changed depending on what they're saying about certain things that affect you. Depending on your gender, if you're a woman, how you vote is significantly different than how you vote if you're a man. Everybody has legitimate, genuine concerns. And I want to make a point. Oftentimes, the problem is not the morality of the people, but the facts of the matter. For example, I was driving in work and I saw, this was a couple days ago actually, I saw a guy holding a sign that said, no peace with communism, let's get Joe Biden's commie policies out of here. Pretty much what it said. Is Joe Biden a communist? Obviously not. But that person genuinely thinks he is. He's misinformed. He's misled by people who know better and mislead people for clicks and for likes. He's misled by your Candace Owens and your Ben Shapiro's who are intelligent and have good things to say, but really what they want to do is rile people up and just radicalize belief, and they're just clickbait nonsense. Okay, a lot of what they say is just clickbaity and extreme, and they don't have any nuance in what they say. All they do is attack people. So they listen to these people, they get riled up. They think Joe Biden's really a communist, that communism's coming, right? And so they protest. Now, what's wrong with all that? Protest? Of course not. If Joe Biden were a communist, if communism was coming to America, it'd be perfectly understandable that people would protest that. It'd be perfectly understandable that people would be afraid. The problem is not with the ethics of what that person's saying. If Joe Biden really is a communist, we should protest his policies. We should listen to him and be respectful, but we don't agree with that. I think that communism is antithetical to American values. It's my belief personally. I'm Cuban, so I'm biased. If it were true, it would warrant his behavior. The problem is not that people are having irrational behaviors. The problem is that their behaviors would be rational if those things were true, but they're not. They're misinformed. Misinformation is the biggest thing. But nobody wants to educate. Everybody just wants to condescend. Everybody just wants to hate. And yeah, some people don't want to learn. And sometimes you got to brush your shoulders off and move on. And some people aren't going to listen to what you have to say. At the end of the day, most people, man, they just have genuine concerns on both sides of the aisle, left and right. And I really think that if we actually had dialogues with one another about the things that are important to us, we would find that we have a lot more in common than we don't have in common about what we value, about what we want. And all the debate is how to get it done. Anyway, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, you know what to do. It's YouTube. Do what you gotta do. Comment below what you think. Do you have a fifth point? Is there a fifth reason you think Cubans supported Trump? If you're watching this and you're Cuban and you voted for Trump and I didn't mention a reason you did, put it down. I'm interested. If you know Cubans that voted for them and you heard them saying things that I didn't mention, put it down. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, like, subscribe, comment, interact with this. I want to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Worried about our country, worried that a nation founded on free thought replaces facts with virtue signal statements. See, I'm not on one side, in both I'm seeing hatred. The way we talk, only a civil war could change it. It's sad the youth that fell fast for it, a spell Castro it, and Black Lives Matter, yes. But how do you defend Fidel Castro? Them comments got me bothered. How many of us slaughtered by the systems? I see Bernie Sanders openly applauding.